look forward to working with you on it.
We are delighted that you are here. Thank you, General Bolden, for your service to this country. A long and distinguished career in the United States Marine Corps, the astronaut office, and now as the administrator of NASA. We are most appreciative of your personal service and your commitment to this country and your continuing service. This past year has been a real busy one for NASA. What a monumental achievement it was to complete the construction of the space station. And now that crew members don't have to focus on assembly of the ISS, they're getting on with the important research up there. Remember, this was one of the things that John Glenn kept pounding over and over as a senator, and then in his, it's hard to believe, it's been 14 years since his retirement, but he's still at it, as you know. And we just had the 50th anniversary of his Mercury flight celebration, and John was at it again, saying the same thing: research, utilize that facility up there that we have. And we've got 6 people up there right now. And better cancer treatment delivery systems have been developed. We've had breakthroughs in vaccine research. And I never want to miss the opportunity that people understand, as a result of the space station, of having a continuous national laboratory that Senator Hutchison was responsible for having it designated as a national laboratory, that in this lab they have now developed the processes and the drugs, basically, that are now in their final FDA trials as a vaccine for salmonella, and another drug that's in its initial FDA trials that is a vaccination for MRSA, which is the explosive bacteria that ravages so many hospitals that they find it very difficult to find drugs that can control it. And so in this space program, we've discovered techniques for performing remote ultrasounds. And recently, we've taken another great step forward. And this was something, again, that I give great credit to Senator Hutchison. The alpha magnetic spectrometer was delivered and is measuring cosmic rays, seeking answers to some of the universe's best kept secrets, such as the nature of dark matter. And so now that the station is complete, NASA then retired the space shuttle. And remember, why did it retire it? Because if you remember, when we lost Columbia in 2003, Admiral Gaiman's commission that did the investigation said you fly the space shuttle just as long as you have to build the space station, because of taking up the components that have been developed to fit in the cargo bay. And once it's completed, you replace the space shuttle with a safer rocket. And if you look at the designs of now the commercial competition that's going on, you find that the crew is on the top of the rocket with the escape system, so that if you have an explosion on the pad, you can save the crew. You can save the crew all the way to orbit by detaching the capsule and bringing the crew safely back. NASA's very dedicated and talented workforce, operated the space shuttle for 30 years. And it helped us open a whole new chapter in our space exploration and a window into the cosmos. We did that by launching and servicing and repairing and fixing over and over again the Space Telescope, Hubble, and protecting our way of life by deploying national security satellites and advancing our knowledge of the solar system by launching interplanetary probes. You've heard a lot about the very moving stories of the efforts to have the final space shuttle mission to perfection, absolute perfection, while most of that workforce knew that they were going to be laid off. Well, that's the kind of dedicated and proud workforce that America needs to continue to have in our next generation of exploration systems. Now, we know we have the SLS and the Orion programs going ahead. One of the things we're going to ask you, General, is we don't think you've got enough in your budget in Orion. You got to be able to have an Orion, a capsule that's completed to put on top of a rocket, the SLS. Late this spring, major components for Orion's upcoming test flight are going to arrive at the Cape, and workers will finish assembling and testing the capsule for a 2014 launch. In 2 years, we're going to launch Orion, and it's going to go through tests that will go out into an elliptical orbit so that it can come back in a ballistic reentry and test all of those reentry systems. The SLS program is continuing the engine testing now at the Stennis Space Center, and it's preparing detailed design specifications for the most powerful rocket in history. Work continues at the Kennedy Space Center as well, overhauling a historic launch pad for NASA's next steps into the solar system that was used to launch Apollo and the shuttle programs. And by the way, the director of the Kennedy Space Center told me that he has got something in between now and October the 1st in this fiscal year, close to $400 million of modernization of that space center. Just in this period of time, that's about 8 months, 7 months, in order to get the Space Center ready for the new systems. Meanwhile, NASA continues to crank out the science missions. With almost 100 spacecraft, either in operation or under development, and last year we saw Messenger entered orbit around Mercury. It was the first mission to the planet in nearly 40 years, and much, much farther away from the sun, 11 billion miles. The Voyager 1 spacecraft is probing the outer reaches of our solar system. And looking out into the galaxy, the Kepler Planet Hunting Telescope has discovered over 2,000 potential planets, and over 60 of them have been confirmed. We've even found a planet in the so-called habitable zone, a habitable zone of its star. And we're looking forward now, as we reach out into the cosmos, of confirming many more planets in the coming months. And this past November, NASA launched the largest and most capable rover ever en route to an August landing of Mars. This thing's amazing. It's the size of a Volkswagen. It's going to have two eyes that pop up, and as it roves, we're going to see it real time with the delay of the transmission from as far away as Mars. It's got a scooper that it's going to go down and scoop up the Martian soil and then analyze it. It's got a beam that it's going to zap rocks so that we can analyze the chemical components. NASA also continues its mission to keep watch over our home planet, seeking to understand the complicated interactions of the Earth's dynamic systems. And, of course, the first A in NASA, aeronautics. Aeronautics research continues as NASA continues to look for new ways to improve aviation safety and revolutionize air transportation. Hallelujah, we finally passed the FAA bill. We can start getting moving to the next generation of air traffic control. All of that's going to come off of the satellites. Where did the satellites come from? They came from our space program. And NASA continues to reach out to students in all 50 states, inspiring and educating our next generation in ways that only this space agency can. So today we're here to see if we can continue the progress of the past year through this next year and beyond. The President has sent us a 2013 budget that is essentially flat with the previous year's enacted level, which for NASA is relatively good given that most of the government agencies got whacked. And so Senator Hutchison and I are pleased to have the NASA Administrator here to talk about the President's proposal. And I'm looking forward to this productive conversation. Now, we'll get into the fact of the recent stories about some of the agency's sensitive data, including some of the algorithms for the International Space Station, that they were compromised, and some NASA mobile devices were stolen. There has been no effect upon the space station, and I want the Administrator to address that. There are also reports that foreign intelligence organizations were thought to be involved in the hackings of additional NASA computer systems, which is not unusual, by the way, because foreign intelligence operations, as well as rogue operators all over the globe, are trying to hack into every computer system of the United States government, and it goes on in massive numbers every day. Space travel is an international endeavor, and having this type of information out of our control certainly could compromise NASA's status as a place where we can secure our data. The President's request is about $2 billion under the amount this committee authorized for the agency, leaving us with some tough choices on how to preserve the balanced approach for NASA. But safety and security of information can't be on the chopping block, and we'll address that. So looking beyond the President's address, we're very pleased to have astrophysicist Neil Tyson here for our second panel to talk about the broader context of NASA and what space exploration means to the country. Dr. Tyson has made a career out of discussing the very complex issues associated with space science and exploration in a way that educates and captivates and excites the public. And Dr. Tyson is no stranger to the subject of our space program, having been appointed twice to presidential panels examining the future of NASA and the aerospace industry. So I'm really looking forward to the testimony of both of you all. And I turn to my partner, and I say my partner, because we wouldn't have a NASA authorization bill back in the fall of 2010 had it not been for this lady right here. And we wouldn't have had the funding over the past funding cycles that has kept NASA at a much better level than a lot of other agencies than if it were not for Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to say that you are certainly downplaying your role in NASA, and the commitment that you have has been absolutely fabulous and important for our ability to pass an authorization bill, which a lot of people didn't think we could, and then further to help get the appropriations that would keep NASA in a place where it can really do the job that we're asking it to do, and which we basically agreed to do. So we're here to try to keep that momentum going in the right direction. I was out at Johnson. The Johnson Space Center has a wonderful program for Cub Scouts. It's not in NASA, but it's in the Visitor Center. And Cub Scouts come from all over Texas, and they have an overnight in the Visitor Center. And I was with a group of those Cub Scouts recently, and the question they asked me was, why has America given up on spaceflight? Now, that was in the last week. And, of course, I said, we're not giving up on space flight. It is a very important move forward. But our shuttles were wearing out, so we are now rebuilding to go beyond where we have been before. But that's not out there in the public. And we need to do the things that assure our young people, who are the ones we want to entice into science and loving the exploration and knowing what it has done for our country, to stay with us and to understand this importance. So that brings me to the agreement that we finally got last year with this administration. And I want to say what we've agreed to. We've agreed to develop the heavy launch vehicle to carry the Orion crew exploration vehicle to destinations beyond low Earth orbit. We have agreed to bring to fruition the beginning of operational commercial cargo delivery flights to the International Space Station. We've agreed to support the development of commercial capabilities to launch crew to and from low Earth orbit, focusing initially on transporting crews for the International Space Station. And we've agreed to support the ongoing development of the James Webb Space Telescope to not only replace the amazing Hubble Space Telescope, but also to see even more detail further into the universe. So we've agreed to all those things. But Mr. Administrator, the actions don't seem to be following the words of the agreements. And that's why I'm glad that we are having this hearing and hoping that we can all have not only the words, but the actions that will take us in the direction that we've agreed we should go. It took a while to finally get the program offices open for Orion and the Space Launch System. And finally, I think late last year, we were able to come to an agreement that we would move forward on that. The fiscal year 2013 budget request was our opportunity to review the actions of the administration toward providing the funding needed to meet our agreed to activities. But reviewing that budget and the call that you made to me gives me great concern, and I have to question the degree of the commitment that we made, all of us together, to go forward for all of the things that we said were our priorities. So now we all understand that we have fiscal challenges, but I believe within the budget that we have, which, as the chairman has said, is basically pretty flat considering the rest of our budgets, knowing that exploration is not something that can be totally prescribed and adhered to, because things happen when you're breaking barriers and you're doing new things that you have to address. But I think we have the available funds. It's a matter of how we put those funds into the actual implementation. And I have questions about the amount requested and the procurement approach that is taking place for the commercial crew development. I remain concerned about the loss of critical workforce and skills that we must have to continue NASA's advances forward into the future. I want to hear what you have to say and hope we can get back on the same page where the budget meets the agreed to goals. I am very pleased that Dr. Tyson is here because he is a scientist, and of course that is a very crucial part of the big picture that we need to develop. Dr. Sam Ting, who really started the whole focus on the spectrometer, and who, for a Nobel laureate, is a fighter at heart, I have to say, because he was told by a previous administrator that there wouldn't be the ability to take the spectrometer up, and that the payload would not be able to be done. But he fought, we fought with him, we supported Dr. Ting's request because we knew that that was a future that was vital for the space station. Dr. Ting made a speech to a scientific group in Texas in January. And the most graphic thing that he showed through a chart was some of the most visionary research that we have embarked on in America in the physics field. That's his Nobel laureate designation, was for physics. And he showed the things that we thought would come, the goals that we had for these visionary research projects. And he put down about 6 or 7. And then he put the results that we got, which were totally different from the goal and more important and better. And that's what he foresees for the cosmic rays that we are now getting hits on in the spectrometer. Because we've already had more hits of cosmic rays on that spectrometer than ever in the history of space exploration. And he believes that the goal is to find out what the dark matter is and how can we harness it for energy that may be used for a Mars settlement or maybe something that we could use on Earth, but you can only do it in space. So he said, here's our goal, but who knows what it will give us? Who knew when we went into space in the first place that we would capture the satellites and use it for national security purposes? Who knew that we would get Velcro? Who knew that we would get MRIs and the huge medical breakthroughs that we've had? So I am committed in my last year to assure that we go in the right direction, utilizing our resources wisely, and that's why I changed appropriations committees, because I so believe in NASA and its potential for our country. And I wanted to make sure that while I'm here, that we don't fudge on human space exploration and we don't cut NASA to the quick, because that's where our corporate knowledge is. And I say corporate in the government sector, but that's where our expertise and our past experiences are that will take us to the future in the most efficient way. So I hope that we can work together to address the concerns that I have and get us on track. I am committed to commercial being a part of our future, but not at the expense of our vital NASA employee sector and the building of the next vehicle that's going to take us beyond where we are. We can't fudge on the future in that way. So I think you know how I feel, and I hope that we will be able to work together. I don't doubt your sincerity in shared goals, but what I'm very concerned about is the implementation that is reflected in the numbers of the budget that the President and the administration released just a couple of weeks ago, and its relationship to our shared goal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And now you see why it's such a pleasure for me to work with Senator Hutchison. And I'll tell you, we both have a healthy degree of skepticism about OMB, because OMB has thought that it has been running the space program for over the last decade. And fortunately, I think that's starting to change, so that policy can be set at the congressional level in consultation with the executive branch, and then that the space program can be run by the administrator of NASA. So with that, General Bolden, welcome. Please, your comments.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Hutchinson, Senator Udall, I would like to do something a little bit different. We submitted a statement.
I'm sorry.
That I was
General Bolden, I forgot. I wanted to call on Senator Udall for a comment.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you, Chairman Nelson and Senator Hutchinson, for those strong statements on the NASA budget. I'm going to have to leave in just 5 minutes here, but I wanted to just say a couple of things about the budget and as it relates to New Mexico, and hopefully we can submit questions for the record. But Administrator Bolden, during the Space Shuttle program, New Mexico's White Sands test facility played a key role in NASA's work on jet propulsion and advanced materials testing. Mr. DeGrasse Tyson and his show Nova Science Now visited my home state last year to feature WISTEF's work on simulating cosmic collisions. WISTEF is testing the impact of space debris on our spacecraft shields by using a powerful gun to shoot particles at them at speeds of 20,000 miles per hour. And I know you're aware of White Sands' unique assets and capabilities. There are many opportunities for White Sands to support NASA missions and to work more closely with commercial space firms. And one of the things that I was going to ask if I was here for you to talk a little bit about that, but we may well have specific questions on that. The other area I wanted to mention is NASA education and some of the New Mexico accomplishments. Your testimony speaks to NASA's educational focus on inspiring today's young people to envision futures in science, technology, engineering, and math. And as you know, these STEM fields are just absolutely crucial to us moving forward in this information age. And in my home state, the New Mexico Space Grant Launch Program brings space into the classroom. As part of the NASA-funded Launch and Learn program, middle school students from all over the state design and build experiments to launch into suborbital space on the Space Loft sounding rocket. So I think other questions we will submit also will deal with the STEM fields and all the great work you're doing there up through K-12 and beyond. And then just finally, on the earth sciences, scientists today know much more about the dangers of global warming and rising sea level thanks to NASA's support for earth science missions. Your written statement highlights NASA's initiative to develop the nation's next generation climate and weather missions. In fact, many of NASA's greatest contributions to science and society have come from unmanned earth science missions, even though these do not always capture the headlines in the same way as human spaceflight. So I hope you get a chance to talk a little bit about that, and we may well submit some questions there. But I think the strong statement by the chairman and the ranking member are very appropriate here, and it's an honor to be here. And I'm sorry I'm not going to be able to hear your testimony, but I have another commitment I have to run to. Thank you, Chairman Nelson, and thank Ranking Member Hutchison.
Thank you, Senator Udall. General Bolden.
Thank you very much. And Senator Nelson, Senator Hutchison, Senator Udall, I would, because of the fact that you have presented very eloquently much of what I was going to say, as has Senator Hutchison, I would like to do something unusual, and I would like to submit my oral statement for the record and just share with you some highlights from it, if I can. And I will also say I want to thank you for putting me before Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. He is a dear friend of mine. He is an incredibly eloquent presenter of everything that I would like to say. And he will actually present to you, because people always want to ask me about supposition. What would it be like if? I'm going to talk about what it is like based on the difficult economic times that we face. But I think Dr. Tyson will talk about what it would be like if, and he speaks very eloquently to that. I feel somewhat like a friend of mine who had to speak between Neil Armstrong and John Glenn recently at a tribute to Senator Glenn. So I understand I'm inadequately prepared to be here, but I will try. I will say, first of all, the President has allowed us to put together what I think is a very ambitious exploration program. It does, in fact, fit within the confines of the budget that we anticipate being able to get and that we hope we'll get. And it does, in fact, live up to the promises of the 2010 Authorization Act. And I'm glad that Senator Hutchison mentioned the three priority areas for NASA and the nation, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. But I do want to remind everyone that these are very difficult times economically, and so what we tried to present was a balanced approach to accomplishing those three priorities that the President and you all agreed upon through the 2010 authorization. I think, as everyone knows, the budget is $17.7 billion. Everything we propose, we think, is critical to ensuring America's continued leadership in space exploration as well as our stewardship of the Earth. NASA, I personally, are committed to making this national resource, that is the International Space Station, available to a broader scientific and commercial research communities, as you have mentioned, Senator Glenn emphasizes, you talked about, and Senator Hutchison talked about. And I will mention, I'm glad that Senator Hutchison mentioned our friend Dr. Sam Ting, and I would remind everyone, AMS, as incredible as it is, would not be bringing us one piece of data were it not for the fact that it has a home. It is on the International Space Station, and had it not been for the existence of the International Space Station, we might not have AMS doing what it's doing right now. So the International Space Station is critically important, and you will hear me emphasize that over and over and over again. I am also committed to ensuring that American companies launching from U.S. soil transport our astronauts and their cargo to the International Space Station. We're on track to develop a flexible deep space launch system that will ultimately be the most capable in history. We're pushing forward with contracting and design efforts to advance this critical next-generation space exploration system, and our fiscal year 13 budget request supports our plans for an uncrewed SLS test flight in 2017 and a crewed test mission by 2021. And I don't want anybody to miss that. Those are hard dates, and they are evidence that we are pushing forward with the development of the SLS and MPCV. We're also confident that this budget supports a 2018 launch for the James Webb Space Telescope, as we came up with after the replan for that particular mission. The request also supports a portfolio of innovative science missions, and we could go on and on and on talking about them. Everyone is disappointed that we had to take a breather, if you will, but to step back from our negotiations with the European Space Agency on a program that they call ExoMars, that we agreed we would participate in planning on. However, we are now developing a new integrated strategy for Mars missions to ensure that the next steps to Mars exploration will support the science objectives that were laid out in ExoMars, the priorities established by the National Research Council's decadal survey on planetary science, and also support our human exploration. The fiscal year 13 budget request continues to support a robust Mars program in spite of what you may have heard. Absolutely essential to obtaining our ambitious goals is the further development of aviation science and space technologies. And we have that funded in this budget. We're going to conduct aeronautics research to enable the realization of the nation's next generation air transportation system, or NextGen, which will provide for safer, more fuel efficient, quieter, and environmentally responsible aircraft that will operate with NextGen. I'm really grateful. NASA, as an agency, is grateful to the American people and to all of you on this committee who have provided support to us in these very difficult and challenging times. But as Senator Hutchison alluded in her opening statement, priorities have to be established. She was incredibly helpful in helping us establish the 3 priorities for the agency, and the SLS MPCV for exploration, the International Space Station shored up by commercial crew and cargo, which is the test bed for that exploration, and then the James Webb Space Telescope. It's what promises to be the most incredible instrument for science and exploration of our universe ever known to mankind. SLS and MPCV are hard evidence that we are pushing forward with our exploration program. We have flown tests on MPCV. We have done drop tests. We just completed some the other day. We just finished another test firing of the J2X at Stennis yesterday. This is hardware. This is not design drawings. This is hardware. I contend that we are probably much farther along on SLS MPCV than we are on any of the other 2 priorities. So I would really challenge anyone who says that we are stepping back from our promise. We are not doing that. And Senator Hutchison, as I've said to you many times, I'm dedicated to this. And we are doing what we promised we'd do.
By the way, one of the differences between you and Dr. Tyson is you refer to it as MPCV, and he'll refer to it as Orion.
That's very true, and he is correct.
Senator Hutchison.
Mr. Administrator, I heard what you just said, but here's how I come at my concern. I told you at our last hearing, and also I've said to you in many meetings that we have had, I do support additional funding and the goal of a commercial crew vehicle, because I think that is an important first step. But I've always said that as long as it doesn't come from the future beyond low Earth orbit, that we're going to be on the same team. So you called me with your budget proposal that was going to come out of the administration, and I see a $326 million combined reduction in Orion and SLS, and a corresponding increase of $330 million for commercial crew. And I was frankly floored, as you know, from our conversation, that it would be so blatant to take it right out of Orion and SLS and put it into commercial crew, rather than trying to accomplish the joint goals that we have of putting forward both and making sure that we didn't take away from the timetables for the future to shore up the commercial crew. How can you explain that?
Senator, the numbers that we submitted are numbers that are consistent with the plan that we had all gone over when we started talking about the development of MPCV and SLS. As I mentioned before, we had to make very difficult choices because we were $2 billion below what we thought we would be for a fiscal year 13 budget. Cuts came from everywhere. Reductions came from everywhere. What we tried to do was maintain a balanced program. In fact, what we did was submit a budget request for a balanced program. As I have mentioned, we have not slowed the development of SLS and MPCV. In fact, we have actually done some things that we did not know we were going to do. Our contractor, prime contractor for the Orion spacecraft, has put in a 2014 test that Senator Nelson mentioned. That was not originally in our plan. The exploration vehicle test, flight test, which will be flown 2 years from now, in 2014, was not originally in our plan, and it is something that we've been able to find the funds to do. That will buy down significant risk on Orion, and it will keep us from having to worry about some things that we would have to either pay for or even take time to do in subsequent development. So that's going to allow us, actually, to get to the 2017 date, which is the first uncrewed test of the integrated system. And that's very important for us. More money would not change that date. That is development work that we have to do. Getting there, I feel much more comfortable now that we have the 2014 flight test planned that Lockheed Martin is going to do on Orion.
What concerns me is not those two dates, the 2014 and the 2017, but you have now put dates on a crewed launch of the Orion on board the SLS for 4 years later at 2021. Now, I've heard you say that, well, it takes longer to complete the human safety ratings for the vehicles and we need to have catch-up time. But 4 years gap doesn't seem to square with staying on a course for that future when the space station is going to be presumably shut down in 2020.
Senator, actually, what we need to do is we will go through in this year, we will have a much better feel for where we are in terms of the progress of our development, and that date may change. But that's a date that we look at right now based on a level budget runout. That the 2021 date is a date that's affected by budget. And given the budget runout that we see right now, that is a date that's there. But we still have some more evaluations in our planning to do before we're able to actually make a definitive decision on the first date for a crewed launch. But 2021 I am a conservative person, and 2021 is a conservative estimate for the first crewed mission on the integrated SLS MPCV combination.
Well, you said that everybody had to be cut some to make the priorities, but in fact, the commercial crew vehicle approach that you're taking was not cut. It was plussed up from last year's spending levels, and yet you cut the Orion and SLS to presumably make that happen. I mean, it was almost exactly the same amount of cut in the SLS and Orion that was plussed up in your budget for the crew, which continues to come back as some sort of quid pro quo that you are over-prioritizing the commercial and not being as concerned about keeping the people at NASA who would be able to stay involved to get us to that next level when the space station is going to be decommissioned.
Senator, you commented about a number of things. I just very briefly, I would say our workforce is stable. I am not doing anything that will take away from the NASA workforce. But I do want to say that in terms of the commercial crew program, I do need to take us back.
Are you saying that with the $330 million cut, that it's not going to affect the NASA workforce?
I'm saying that the NASA workforce, the SES workforce, the 17,000 plus people that we have right now, as far as we see, is stable to a certain point. You know, everybody, we are looking at how we move the skills around. So our center directors right now are working to determine how they take the projects that we have assigned them and how we may need to move skills around or bring in. We want to bring in fresh blood, if you will. We're looking for how we take some of the interns and co-ops that we train and employ them. So those are issues of workforce that we're looking at. But the civil service workforce, I don't expect to be affected by this budget. This budget enables us to keep our civil service workforce relatively stable for now. What I do want to emphasize is when we talk about commercial crew, it's very easy to use $406 million as the baseline. That's not the baseline. If you all will recall, my original request was over $1 billion. We brought that down for fiscal year 12 to $850 million. We were cut by half. When I was asked last year, what effect does it have if you don't get $850 million? I said that directly affects the date of delivery of commercial crew capability. That is how we got to 2017 instead of 2015, 2016. And any subsequent reductions from what the President has requested for commercial crew only serves to delay the amount of time that we have a commercial and American capability to get our crews to the International Space Station. The reason I wanted to emphasize the importance of ISS is I have to be able to support that. You know, I'm not worried about it right now for cargo because of STS-134 and STS-135 that this Congress funded after the President's request. So we all worked together to get that. And it is really important that we got STS-134 and 135 flown because now with the delays that we may see in getting to a viable crew and cargo program, we are not worried about having to demand station. I need to get American crews to station on American vehicles and decreasing the amount of money below $829 million, what we request, will not help close that gap.
Mr. Administrator, we agree that we need to get the commercial crew up so that we're not dependent on the Russians. In our authorization bill, we provided the allocations that would allow that to happen without taking from the longer term, the beyond low Earth orbit vehicles. The authorization level was $500 million. That was signed by the President. That's part of the agreement. So when you come in and ask for $850 million and you take it right out of Orion and SLS, we've got a disconnect here if you're saying that is the baseline budget. No. $500 million is the authorized level. So I want to ask you a question because I've been looking at this and trying to get a way forward that the crew, the commercial crew vehicle can go forward with a reasonable level, and we can also not stop the beyond low Earth orbit, both NASA employee base to learn from the commercial vehicle and to go forward. And here's the line that I would like to take and have your response. And it is in the insistence on spreading the money out to some multiples, 3, maybe more companies, commercial companies, to subsidize these companies, which some of them are not going to be able to function if they don't have these subsidies once you make a decision about who is going to do the vehicle. So we're essentially throwing a lot of money at some companies that may never be able to use it to the taxpayer advantage. You reversed a previous decision to use a federal acquisition regulations-based procurement for commercial crew in the next phase. leading to the critical design review of the various systems, and you've gone back to the use of the Space Act agreements. The Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel recently issued its report expressing some concerns about this approach and the degree to which it can enable NASA to ensure the safety standards are being met. So I'm just wondering if you're going to put off the safety-related human rating requirements to that next level, isn't there maybe an overspending at this point in the proliferating of companies that are getting the federal subsidies? And couldn't you, number one, make the commercial crew developers more accountable in the early stages if you cut back on the number of companies that you're dealing with, and go back to the, maybe the more traditional approach of getting the designs and the standards and then going out for bids and lowering the number of subsidies you have to do of private companies to maybe 2 instead of 3 or more, and spend the taxpayer dollars more efficiently and be able to do the job that we want you to be able to do for commercial crew, and also keep the ongoing coordination with your NASA-based SLS and Orion development, and have a win on both sides.
Senator, let me offer this. If I had made an earlier decision to go with one of the 2 companies that were believed to be competitors for commercial crew, Boeing would not be in the competition now.
And I'm glad Boeing is, but we are where we are. We're not back there.
Senator, I'm just saying,
for
those who would like to
gives
see,
me comfort.
For those who would like to see me make a decision on a company now, or would like to have seen me go with a contract in February as my original acquisition strategy stated, the experts, people who are considered to be experts in acquisition and funding, GAO, the NASA ASAP, my OIG, many of them said, given the budget, given you have now $406 million, we think it is prudent, this is their direction to me, we feel it's prudent for you to review your acquisition strategy and maybe not go with the strategy that you presently have. No one was as reluctant as was I to change my mind on the acquisition strategy. We had come to the strategy that we had after long deliberation. So to go back and say we're going to extend the use of Space Act agreements was not something that was, tops on my list of things I want to do. However, I felt very comfortable in doing that because we had adhered to the insistence from the ASAP, from the Aerospace Safety Advisory Panel, that we put requirements and specifications in place so that any person planning to bid on a commercial crew system, not a vehicle, on a system, and that's what we're talking about now, would know what NASA's requirements are, would know what NASA's human rating specifications were, and would have no ground on which to stand to say, well, in this design that we developed, we didn't know you were going to. No one can say that because there are hard requirements out there right now that anyone who gets a contract will have to follow. There are hard specifications for human rating standards that everybody knows. That's what they have them in hand. They cannot say, I don't know. The problem, there is no problem of safety with going to Space Act agreements. The Space Act agreements input program risk, not safety risk. I am responsible for safety. And as I have said from the day that I became the administrator, I will not jeopardize safety for crews. Safety is not being jeopardized by going to the Space Act agreement, expanding that.
But
we
the
still
budget
will,
and
we
the
will guarantee
future,
safety.
Mr. Administrator, the budget and the future are being jeopardized. So if you say the safety is there, why not go to fewer companies now that you do have the ones that are going to be the most serious contenders? Why not go the like they did the F-35, for instance, where you did go through two pretty comprehensive and do it within the budget that we've agreed to that was in the authorization.
F-35 is not a great example. It's not a good comparison because there was a long road before getting to that point where they came down to two competitors. They went through much of what we did. But I need to give these companies time to learn lessons that NASA has learned through blood. And that is the advantage of extending the Space Act agreement period of time. It is now giving Ed Mango and his commercial crew team an opportunity to put people in the facilities. We have NASA employees who are on site with the contractors, acting as consultants, seeing how they perform, seeing how they do their work, overseeing what they do or not overseeing in terms of control, but looking at the way that they carry out their design and productivity. We are much better off having a little bit more time to look at them and determine who the real players are, such that when we finally go out with a request for proposal 14 to 20 months after this, that we know we'll get a good product. We still think we're going to have a crew system available in 2017. That date is set. Now, that is something that more money might be able to change. But for right now, 2017 is a date that is not in jeopardy with the President's budget. If we have to extend any other periods, then the 2017 date becomes jeopardized, and our ability to support the International Space Station with American companies on American vehicles becomes jeopardized. And that's not where I want to go. I'm going to pay the Russians $450 million a year for every year that I don't have an American capability to put humans into low Earth orbit. And I know you don't want to do that. You and I have both agreed. But that's the price I pay, $450 million. If you add that to 406, I'm up to $850 million. So I am trying. We are not taking money away from SLS MPCV. SLS MPCV.
It's clear. It's in the numbers and it's irrefutable. If you had the passion and the concern for the SLS and the Orion that you have for protecting whatever number of commercial companies that you want to
Senator, not to
put
get
out
personal.
there,
my passion for SLS MPCV exceeds anybody's in this room.
Well,
so
it's not shown in the numbers, Mr.
Senator,
Administrator.
I fight for
problem.
SLS MPCV just as much as I do for every other of the three priorities we have agreed.
It took us a year to even get a contract that would even begin to be put out there. The NASA administration has drug its feet on the other of the human space flights that we have on our agenda and continues to push above the authorization levels and act like that's the baseline budget. And I think if you just would open your mind to the possibility that you could cut down the number but not the amount of emphasis that you have in the commercial sector, that we could do both.
Senator, when we cut down the number of
way forward,
when we cut down the number of competitors, we will probably drive up the cost. I'm paying right now a set amount in a Space Act agreement. We have a set amount. So I will either have $406 million for the next 5 years, or I will have $406 million this year and then $829 the next that I can contribute as a partner. Whatever it costs over that for development is coming out of the pockets of those developers. It's not accurate to think that we are subsidizing a company. We are a partner. And whereas NASA would be paying the development cost, as we did for all of the weapon systems and everything else, we are not paying the development cost right now. The company is paying the development cost minus whatever I can give them through the COTS program, through the commercial crew program, through other programs. It's really important to do that. Once we sign a contract, then I'm on the hook to pay for whatever they say it's going to cost. There is no sharing anymore. It's now my cost. They don't put in a penny. So if the bill is $1 billion, I get it. The American taxpayer gets it. and that's where it's going to be. If there are mistakes made in the design because I cut them short of this 14-month period that we're giving them right now, and there are engineering changes required, I'm going to get that bill. The American taxpayer is going to get that bill. I know it doesn't seem like it, but this is going to be cheaper for the American taxpayer in the long run. We are going to get a much better product in the long run. We are doing what we can. We took the best we had from previous programs and put them into SLS and MPCV. That's why I'm so confident about that program. There are a lot of knowns in SLS and MPCV. You look at the first stage propulsion system. Those are shuttle main engines. You look at the upper stage rocket that we one day will have, the J2X. We're testing that engine. We're getting confidence in that engine. You look at the basic design of the vehicle. It's stuff that we're very familiar with. The only unknown is what the boosters are going to be, because we know we've got to have advanced boosters. And industry is coming in, even as we speak, with recommendations on what those advanced boosters will be, and we're going to get the best that American industry can provide. So I am much more confident, about SLS MPCV, and that may be the reason that it appears that I'm not passionate about it. I am incredibly passionate, but I'm also a lot more confident because this is something that we're a lot more familiar with, to be quite honest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. General Bolden, I want to recall for everybody here the history of how we got it to where we are on the amount of money for the commercial rockets. Remember, it was the House of Representatives that had whacked the president's request of $800 million down to $300. We in the Senate had passed an appropriation of $500 million. And so naturally in the conference committee, we were able to get it up, primarily Senator Mikulski, the chairman, and her ranking member on the appropriations subcommittee, Senator Hutchison, to get it up to $406 million. Now, I'm very sympathetic to what you're saying, that in order to stay on a schedule of 2017 to launch commercial crew, you're going to need more than $406 million. And so in these constrained budget times, the question is, where are we going to get that? We certainly don't want to take it out of the big rocket or Orion. But I also am concerned about the fact that on the big rocket, it's great. We're going to test it in 2014. That's in 2 years. We're going to start launching big systems in 2 years. And you're going to do a more outfitted test in 2017. But then it takes 4 years from 2017 to 2021 before you put the first crew on board. Now, something just doesn't seem right there. Why the delay of 4 years?
Senator, as Bill Gerstenmaier has testified before this and other committees, the development program for the SLS MPCV, for the system, is a very complex program. We are still looking at what we have to do once we fly the test on Orion in 2014. We still need to understand what challenges we have in this development program. So it's actually, I would hate to say it's too early, but it is too early to say definitively how long it's going to take to get to first human flight. We have said before, there are ways to fly earlier. It is a matter of budget if you talk about can you fly a year earlier or 2 years earlier. But there are other things that we just don't know yet. We don't know how well our processes are going to respond to changes that we've made. We don't know how rigorous our management techniques are going to have effect. Efficiencies that we have tried to put into this system and its development based on lessons we learned from Constellation, it's just too early for us to know whether those have taken effect or not yet. I could assume that we are going to get the efficiency gains that we're counting on, but that would not be very good because I would find myself back in a situation as we were with Constellation, where we now don't have enough money and we don't have enough time to meet the date that I promised you. 2021 is a conservative estimate, and we feel confident we can get there with the budget that we have and the budget we're submitting for 2013 with the run-out that's there right now.
Well, remember also in the context of where we come today, the House of Representatives had also completely, basically eliminated the James Webb telescope. And in the attempt in the conference committee to get that money back in so that James Webb could proceed, which is going to take us back almost to the beginning of time in the universe, and therefore is an extremely important scientific mission. But with a limited amount of money, we know we're asking you to do an awful lot. But they came a long way to get it up to 406 for commercial crew and put back the money for James Webb. So what we need to do is work with you at coming up with a number for commercial and not at the same time sacrifice anything on the big rocket and Orion. For example, you've got a request of $200 million less for Orion than was enacted in 2012. So there's less money in your request for Orion than was put in for Orion in 2012. And we just got to work this out. All right, let me, before I turn to Senator Rubio, let me ask you about one of the good news things, at least from the Kennedy Space Center standpoint, is the significant amount of money that is going in to redo the Space Center in order to accommodate all of the new rockets and the new changes. But in the way that it's put about in the budgeting, it gets confused. It looks like 21st century is diminished when in fact a lot of getting ready for the 21st century space program is you can't fly a rocket unless you have a launch pad. And so there's a lot of construction money in this fiscal year between now and September the 30th of this year that's going to be going into the redoing of facilities at the Kennedy Space Center. You want to comment about that?
Senator, I thank you very much. There are a number. What we try to do in working with the staff and the committee here is to break out funds in a method that would be much more understandable to people. And this is an area of concern when we use the term SLS, heavy lift launch vehicle. If you look at where we were last year, that was the broad category for everything that had to do with heavy lift. What we've tried to do in this budget and what we are doing in practicality is we break out funds that are spent on ground systems, not the vehicle itself, into what we call exploration systems, exploration ground systems, and 21st century. Very simply stated, maybe oversimplifying it, 21st century deals with making the launch complex at the Kennedy Space Center a multi-use facility. So it serves both SLS and future commercial users. Things very simple, like putting in the flame trench a movable deflector so that the rocket we can move the deflector to one position for an Atlas if you were to put it there and another position for a Falcon 9. The exploration ground systems deal strictly with SLS, MPCV. So they are divided into 3 other systems. One of them has to do with command and control. I need those systems in place before we fly the 2017 mission. I need those systems in place for the folk at Kennedy to be able to go through simulation so that when we bring the vehicle down and we decide we're going to launch, they have been through simulation training and the like. Some of it has to do with the infrastructure itself. So there are 3 different categories of the exploration ground system. So you will see now, and I don't have it memorized, but I think we actually have budget lines now for exploration ground systems, for SLS, for 21st century, and then for SLS, which is vehicle development itself. So we hope it will make things clearer to people when we look at it that way.
Well, I just want to make clear for the record, for those elsewhere in the country that are questioning the construction projects at the Kennedy Space Center, those other areas of the country that are building rockets, that you can't launch rockets unless you have the launch pad. And so you have to do one in order to do the other. Senator Rubio.
Thank you. And my first question was along those lines, too. We've heard some of the same observations made by some that why are we spending so much money on the 21st century launch complex if we don't have a system in place yet? And I think you touched upon it. You may want to add to that. But the notion of how we need to do those simultaneously is so critical in terms of how it – I mean, could you just touch upon why it's so important we do both at the same time?
What we're trying to do, and even when you look at the vehicle development itself, SLS and Orion, we want to be able to reach a date in the future when everything comes together. It doesn't do us any good to have an Orion vehicle that's ready to fly a year before I have a launch vehicle. It doesn't do me any good to have a launch vehicle ready a year before I have a crew module to put on it. And it definitely doesn't do me any good if I have Orion and SLS teamed together, ready to launch, sitting in the VAB because the launch facility is not complete. So we're running programs in parallel. The ground systems development, the 21st century, SLS, MPCV. They're 4 separate entities, but we're running them and funding them in parallel so that they all come together at a critical time for us. That critical time right now is 2017. And the way that we submitted the budget, the way that, if you look at our PERT charts that some people used to use a long time ago, but if you look at our planning charts, and which is the schedule, you'll see that, you know, we're moving along such that everything comes together in time to support a 2017 launch. And that's oversimplification, but hopefully that helps.
On the overall topic of, as we talk about funding today, I mean, clearly the issue that hangs over the space program is the fact that at the time of growing national debt and fiscal constraints, we're trying to figure out a way to keep our leadership in space, but do so with limited resources that more than ever before, and I don't think there's ever been a good time to waste money, but more than ever before it requires us to look at every penny that we spend. And so in that debate, we've heard a lot of conversations, rightfully so, about what role NASA is going to play in our own launch operations. But we're on the verge of what I think is a historic milestone, and that's both SpaceX and Orbital Sciences and others that are about to do some of these test launches for cargo, their cargo. I think that's no doubt that that's going to be an inevitable part of our space program. The commercial component is going to be a part as we move forward, and in fact may free up NASA to do some other things that, in deep space and otherwise, by allowing us to rely more on those sorts of things. Can you talk a little bit about that? You know, because I think that's obviously those of us who are familiar with the space program hear about it every day, but there's a real lack, I think, of public information, and it's no one's fault, but I'm shocked at how many people don't realize that we're on the verge of that launch, which I think is now scheduled for SpaceX.
SpaceX is now the end of April-ish, and Orbital sometime in the summer.
What do those launches mean from a kind of, I don't want to say historical perspective?
They are historical milestones. Very simply put, we have never had a private company launch a rocket with a capsule on it for any purpose, put it in orbit, rendezvous with another vehicle that has humans in it, station keep, be attached to that vehicle, which is the International Space Station, such that it becomes an integral part of the International Space Station, take the all-important step of opening the hatch, okay, opening the hatch, which means that now the existence of the International Space Station is dependent upon the structural integrity of Dragon or of Cygnus. That's a historical milestone. When we can open the hatch on a private vehicle and have everything stay intact and still useful and people breathe, that's pretty important. And that's what's going to happen when SpaceX flies at the end of April, and that's what will happen again when Cygnus flies in the summer. That's critical. And if I were talking to the Cub Scouts that Senator Hutchison had, Senator, I thank you so much for spending your time. I know you got a lot of things you could do. You could do nothing more valuable than spending your time with the boys, with the Cub Scouts. We have got, because that's the future. So one of them is going to be sitting here in this chair trying to demonstrate that they're passionate about this stuff to somebody who's going to succeed Senator Hutchison. But they're not going to do it if I don't have a program for them to be inspired by. And so what you talk about, this that's going to happen this spring and summer, is a critical first step. It says American companies can, in fact, do what foreign companies do. We know we can do that. We've done it throughout history. But we don't have the capability to do it right now. You know, we don't have an American company that has demonstrated its ability to launch, rendezvous with, and be birthed to the International Space Station.
That leads to the follow-up question, because I'm out of time, but the follow-up question on that is, and it's not really a question, it's more of asking for your observation, what that means from the mission statement of NASA at this point. For example, it's my guess now, and a lot of these issues are issues I've now been confronting for a couple of years at the federal level, although I'm familiar from my state experience of the importance of these launch capabilities are to Florida. So now you're assuming a couple of years out, we begin to have a very reliable private sector commercial capability to do certain things. That frees up NASA to do what?
That frees us up to spend our time and effort on completing the development of the exploration vehicles that Senator Hutchison is about which she is so passionate. It frees us up to focus our efforts on getting humans beyond low Earth orbit to places like an asteroid, where the President has told us to go in 2025, to the Martian environment in the mid-2030s. It frees us up. Most importantly, though, a thing that we don't talk about very often, in fact, we probably never talk about it, in the National Space Act that established NASA in 1958, even back then, people were smart enough to know that NASA's job is to create technologies that can be transferred into the private sector for the benefit of the American economy. The big thing that commercial crew and cargo are going to bring to this country is the ability to provide a market for people all over the world who want to take things to low Earth orbit. They won't have to go to Ariane. They won't have to go to Russia. They won't have to go to China. They won't have to go anywhere. They can come back to American shores and put their spacecraft on an American rocket and get it to low Earth orbit. That's the economic benefit of what we're about. And that is one of our priorities in the National Space Policy of 2010 that was signed into law by the President. And it is a very important part of the 1958 Space Act and its attendant modifications through the years. But we don't talk about that very often.
We'll wrap this up with one additional thing that I want to ask you, Mr. Administrator. The NASA Inspector General, Paul Martin, recently testified before the House that NASA has been the subject of numerous cyber attacks, some potentially stemming from foreign intelligence agencies and organized criminal enterprises. And he stated, and I quote, "Skilled and committed cyber attackers could choose to cause significant disruption to NASA operations, as IT networks are central to all aspects of NASA's operations." Now, let me just say that we've spent a great deal of time on this in the Intelligence Committee, and of course the attacks are attempted every day, as I mentioned earlier, and they're attempted at all government agencies, and thus far with the national security agencies, we've been able to protect against those cyber attacks. There are state actors out there. There are non-state actors that every day are trying to penetrate the computers. But with regard to NASA, in light of your IG's report, I want to ask you 3 questions. Have there been any instances where a cyber attack has resulted in disruption of a NASA mission?
Senator, there have never been any that we have been able to find.
Second question. Have there been any cases where you suspected a cyber attack impacting a mission?
Senator, to my knowledge and in my query of my folk, there have never been any that we suspected that there was anything that would have had an effect on a mission.
So the loss of the algorithms with regard to some of the functions on the space station, there is no evidence that that had any effect upon the operation of the station.
Senator, there was no effect on the loss of anything on station, but I do need to elaborate a little bit, if I may. No one's as concerned about cybersecurity and IT security as I. And you've heard this from the head of the NSA, from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, from the Secretary of Defense. This is a serious threat. There are 3 areas when we talk about IT that concern us all. One is thefts and losses, and we talked about this a little bit before. One of the things that I'm doing is emphasizing to our employees that they have to be vigilant. They can't leave a computer, a laptop, a laptop that has NASA information on the front seat of a car. Locking the car with a NASA laptop is not sufficient security. They can't put it down when they go to an airport. That's personal discipline and the like, and we can affect that. We can't affect someone breaking into an office at NASA headquarters and stealing a laptop or a computer. The other one is hacking and intrusion. That happens to all of us, and I don't know that we're ever going to stop that, but what we do is we put safeguards in place. If you go to the if you're talking about the International Space Station, it's not impossible to do anything, but right now we're confident that we have a system of encryption. Any command that goes to the International Space Station, any critical command goes through an elaborate system of encryption. So, first of all, there would be no commands on a laptop that someone would be carrying around. So that I am not concerned about. But any commands that are going to go from a console, whether it's in Huntsville or Moscow or anywhere, has to go through a system of encryption at the Johnson Space Center. In the case of disasters where we would transfer responsibility to Huntsville, Alabama, it would go through the same encryption at the Marshall Payload Operations Center, which would assume control.
So
the third area is encryption, and that again is personal behavior and discipline. And what we will tell our employees, if you are going to put what we consider to be critical information on a laptop, encrypt it. It's very simple. Just encrypt it such that if your laptop falls in the hands of someone else, they've at least got to go through some effort to get it. They don't just open up the laptop, turn it on, and there is everything as the IG, I think, may think happened in this case, but I don't know that really happened. We haven't had an opportunity to look at the report and the evidence that he has to even determine whether someone really did have vital data that was readily available on a laptop.
So you think the algorithms were lost because they were on a laptop?
Senator, what I have to say is the issue that Paul Martin raised is in a pending report that I have not seen. So I would rather not comment on the contents of what was in his report. I have checked in my organization, and to my knowledge, but I will take it for the record, we have not seen the report to which he referred. So we definitely have not seen the information that he has or the evidence that he has. So I can't even say that there were algorithms on the laptop, but I will take that question for the record and get back to you.
But you can assure this committee that were the algorithms to get into some third party's hands that wanted to do something bad, that they couldn't because you encrypt any of the commands that go to the station.
Senator, I can assure you that if, in the unlikely event, someone ended up with a laptop that had critical commands for the International Space Station or any of the payloads on board, If that unlikely occurrence happened, they would still have to get through another set of firewalls at the Johnson Space Center, because everything that goes to the International Space Station, as it did with Shuttle, is encrypted prior to transmission. And we have verified that, so they would not be able to get commands to the International Space Station.
Okay. As you're doing your investigation, you might also find out why only 1% of NASA laptops and portable devices are encrypted versus a government average of 54%.
And Senator, that's the encryption issue that I mentioned, that I can take action there, and I intend to do so. I can make it a policy or reemphasize the policy that when critical information goes onto a laptop or a personal device, that it's encrypted or it not go on that device. That's a matter of behavior and personal discipline. That's not a foreign entity.
But it's also a matter of policy.
That is a matter of policy.
And that is, why is NASA so far behind the rest of the government in securing the data on its portable devices?
Senator, I will try to, one more time. Prior to this week, it was my impression that I had established a policy that said no one would do what they did. So once again, it is the leader who thought something was done and now has to go back and find out whether it was really done.
So the way we can wrap this up is if you will just give us a full briefing, classified if necessary, once you have reviewed the IG's report. And then in that briefing, tell us the procedures and what you do to investigate those occurrences that are mentioned in the IG's report.
Senator, I'll be certain to do that.
Okay. Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. I apologize for not being here earlier. I had a couple of people from Arkansas that I had to introduce at another committee. But I think in the interest of time that I'll go ahead and just listen.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hutchison, any further comments from you?
I think I've made my point, and I think he's made his point, and we have to work together to hopefully get more flexibility.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think the long and short of it, of what we're saying up here, is that we want to see that Orion is getting sufficiently funded so that it is ready by the time the big rocket's ready, and not vice versa. And the other thing that I will say is that I think that we're going to have more money than this year's level into the commercial rockets so that we can at least keep on that 2017 schedule for launching humans to the space station. And, of course, my preference, and I think most people's preference, is if there's any way we could get those into 2016, which was the original target. So with that, Mr. Administrator, thank you.
Senator, thank you very much.
Very, very much. And I would like to call up the second panel. Dr. Tyson.